I declined to attend my cousin's destination wedding after she publicly humiliated me at mine. My aunt threatened to cut ties with our entire family if I didn't show up, so I blocked her number too. I, 28F, got married last year to my wonderful husband Jake, 30M. It was a beautiful ceremony, and everything was going perfectly until my cousin Brittany, 26F, decided to make it all about her. Some background: Brittany and I were close growing up. We're only 2 years apart, and we spent every summer together at our grandparents' lake house. We were more like sisters than cousins. Our families were always close. My mom and Aunt Karen are sisters, and they've always been best friends. We lived in the same neighborhood, went to the same schools, and were involved in many of the same activities. As kids, Brittany and I were inseparable. We'd spend hours playing make-believe, building elaborate forts in the woods behind our grandparents' house, and staying up late whispering secrets and dreams. I still remember the time we tried to run away together because our parents wouldn't let us get pet rabbits. We made it as far as the end of the street before we got hungry and came home. But as we got older, things started to change. Brittany always had to be the center of attention, and she couldn't stand it when anyone else was in the spotlight. It started small. She'd interrupt me when I was talking to friends, or she'd try to one-up my accomplishments. If I got an A on a test, she'd make sure everyone knew she got an A+. If I made the soccer team, she'd suddenly develop an interest in soccer and try out too. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just friendly competition. But as we entered high school, Brittany's behavior became more toxic. She started spreading rumors about me, trying to turn our friends against me. Once, when I had a crush on a boy in our class, Brittany went out of her way to flirt with him and ask him out, even though she wasn't interested in him. She just couldn't stand the idea of me being happy. Despite all this, I still cared about Brittany. We had so much history, and I kept hoping she'd grow out of this phase. When we went off to college, different schools, thankfully, I thought maybe the distance would help reset our relationship. For a while, it seemed to work. We'd catch up during holidays and breaks, and Brittany seemed more mature. She'd ask about my classes and my friends, and she even seemed genuinely happy when I started dating Jake in my junior year. Jake was a breath of fresh air. He was kind, funny, and completely uninterested in the kind of drama Brittany thrived on. When I introduced him to my family, everyone loved him, even Brittany seemed to approve. After graduation, Jake and I moved in together, and things got serious pretty quickly. He proposed on our 2-year anniversary, during a picnic in the park where we had our first date. It was simple, sweet, and perfect. When I got engaged, Brittany was genuinely happy for me. She even volunteered to be one of my bridesmaids. I was thrilled. I thought maybe we could rekindle our close relationship. Oh, how naive I was. The wedding planning went smoothly, and Brittany seemed to be on her best behavior. She helped with the bridal shower, attended all the dress fittings, and even organized a fantastic bachelorette party. I really thought we were back to being best friends. Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed. Like how Brittany kept suggesting I choose bridesmaid dresses that were a bit too revealing or unflattering. Or how she'd make little comments about my choice of flowers or decorations, always with a smile but with a hint of criticism. But I was so caught up in the excitement of planning my wedding that I brushed these things off. The day of the wedding arrived, and everything was perfect. The ceremony was held in a beautiful old church, with sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. I felt like a princess in my dress, an A-line gown with delicate lace sleeves and a sweetheart neckline. Jake looked handsome in his tux, and when we said our vows, I could see tears in his eyes. It was magical. Then came the reception. We had just finished our first dance, and it was time for the speeches. My maid of honor, my best friend Sarah, gave a heartwarming toast, talking about how Jake and I met and how she'd never seen me happier. Jake's best man, his brother Mike, followed with a funny speech full of embarrassing stories about Jake's bachelor days. Then, to my surprise, Brittany stood up and clinked her glass. She wasn't scheduled to give a speech, but I figured she wanted to say a few words. I smiled at her encouragingly, excited to hear what she had to say. Oh, how I wish I could go back in time and tackle her before she opened her mouth. Brittany started off nicely enough, talking about our childhood memories and how close we were. But then her speech took a sharp turn. You know, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, I always thought I'd be the first one to get married. After all, I was always the pretty one, the fun one, the one all the boys chased after. The room went silent. I could feel Jake tense up beside me. But Brittany wasn't done. I guess Jake here has a thing for plain Janes. I mean, who would have thought our little wallflower cousin would snag a man before me? Must be that old saying, there's a lid for every pot, right? I sat there, frozen in shock. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jake squeezed my hand, but I barely felt it. Brittany continued, her voice getting louder and more animated. But hey, at least she finally lost some weight for the wedding. Remember when we used to go to the beach, and she'd always wear a t-shirt over her swimsuit? God, it was embarrassing. At this point, my dad stood up and tried to take the microphone away from her, but Brittany dodged him and kept going. And let's talk about that dress. I mean, it's nice and all, but don't you think it's a little much? Trying to hide those love handles, sweetie? That's when Jake stood up. His face was red with anger, and I'd never seen him look so furious. That's enough, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You need to leave. Now. Brittany just laughed. Oh, come on. I'm just telling the truth. Someone had to say it. My brother and Jake's friends quickly escorted Brittany out of the reception hall, but the damage was done. The joyful atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by an awkward tension. I excused myself and ran to the bathroom, where I broke down in tears. Sarah, my maid of honor, followed me into the bathroom. She held me while I cried, telling me not to listen to Brittany, that I was beautiful and that everyone could see how happy Jake and I were. Brittany's just jealous, she said. She can't stand that you're happy and she's not. The rest of the reception was a blur. My family and friends rallied around me, telling me how beautiful I looked and how happy they were for us. But Brittany's words kept echoing in my head. All my insecurities, all the things I'd worked so hard to overcome, came flooding back. Jake was amazing through it all. He never left my side, holding my hand and whispering words of love and encouragement. He even managed to get me laughing again, making silly faces at me during the cake cutting and purposely messing up during our choreographed dance. Later that night, as Jake and I were getting ready for bed in our hotel room, he held me close and whispered, "You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, inside and out. Don't let anyone ever make you doubt that." What Brittany said. It's all lies. You're perfect to me, and I'm the luckiest man in the world to be your husband. His words helped, but the hurt remained. The next day, my phone was flooded with messages from family members, all expressing their shock and anger at Brittany's behavior. My Aunt Karen, Brittany's mom, called to apologize profusely, saying she had no idea Brittany would do something like that. "I'm so sorry, sweetie," Aunt Karen said, her voice choked with tears. "I don't know what got into her. This isn't how we raised her to behave." I appreciated her apology, but I couldn't help feeling that Aunt Karen had always enabled Brittany's behavior, making excuses for her, and never really holding her accountable. I didn't hear from Brittany for weeks. When she finally reached out, it was with a half-assed apology. "I'm sorry if you were offended," she texted. "I was just trying to be funny. You know how I am, I don't have a filter." I didn't respond. I couldn't bring myself to forgive her, not yet. The hurt was still too raw. Months passed, and life went on. Jake and I settled into married life, and I tried to put the incident behind me. We bought our first house, a cute little fixer-upper that we spent weekends renovating together. I threw myself into my work, finally getting the promotion I'd been working towards. But every time I looked at our wedding photos or watched our wedding video, I felt a pang of sadness. What should have been the happiest day of my life had been tainted by Brittany's cruel words. I started seeing a therapist to work through my feelings. Dr. Lisa helped me understand that Brittany's behavior said more about her own insecurities than it did about me. We worked on building my self-esteem and setting healthy boundaries. Then, about 6 months after our wedding, I got a call from my aunt. Brittany was engaged, and they were planning a destination wedding in the Maldives. My aunt wanted to know if Jake and I would attend. I was stunned. After everything that had happened, did they really expect me to fly halfway across the world to celebrate Brittany's wedding? I told my aunt I'd think about it and hung up. That night, Jake and I had a long talk. He said he'd support whatever decision I made, but he also reminded me that I didn't owe Brittany anything. Your mental health comes first, he said. If going to this wedding is going to cause you pain, then we don't have to go. I spent the next few days agonizing over the decision. Part of me wanted to be the bigger person, to show Brittany that her words hadn't affected me. Another part of me was terrified of facing her again, of potentially subjecting myself to more humiliation. I talked it over with Dr. Lisa in our next session. She helped me realize that it wasn't about being the bigger person or proving anything to Brittany. It was about taking care of myself and honoring my own feelings. After much deliberation, I decided to decline the invitation. I sent a polite email to my aunt, explaining that while I appreciated the invitation, I didn't feel comfortable attending given what had happened at our wedding. I wished Brittany and her fiancé all the best but said we wouldn't be able to make it. I thought that would be the end of it. Oh, how wrong I was. The next day, my phone exploded with messages and calls from various family members. Apparently, Brittany had gone on a rampage, accusing me of trying to ruin her wedding like she had supposedly ruined mine. She was telling anyone who would listen that I was just jealous because her wedding was going to be so much more lavish and exotic than mine. My cousins on my mom's side were divided. Some of them thought I was being petty and should just forgive and forget. Others, who had witnessed Brittany's behavior over the years, were firmly on my side. But the real kicker came when my aunt called. She was furious. "How dare you decline the invitation?" she screeched. "After everything our family has done for you? Brittany made one little mistake, and you're going to hold it against her forever?" I tried to explain my position calmly, but my aunt wasn't having it. "If you don't come to this wedding," she threatened, "I'll make sure you're cut off from the entire family. No more holiday gatherings, no more family reunions. You'll be dead to us." I was shocked. I knew my aunt could be dramatic, but this was a whole new level. "Aunt Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm sorry you feel that way. But I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I'll be uncomfortable and anxious just to keep the peace. Brittany humiliated me on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I'm not ready to forgive that, and I'm certainly not ready to celebrate her happiness when she showed such disregard for mine." My aunt's response was to start screaming about family loyalty and how I was being selfish. I could feel my anxiety rising, my hands shaking as I held the phone. And then, something in me snapped. Without another word, I hung up the phone and blocked my aunt's number. The relief I felt was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time since my wedding, I felt like I could breathe freely. I didn't have to worry about pleasing everyone else at the expense of my own well-being. When I told Jake what I'd done, he hugged me tight and told me he was proud of me for standing up for myself. We celebrated that night with takeout and a movie marathon, and I felt lighter than I had in months. Of course, the drama didn't end there. My aunt, finding herself blocked, started reaching out to other family members to get to me. She told them all sorts of stories, how I was tearing the family apart, how I was jealous of Brittany's happiness, how I was being petty and cruel. Some family members took her side, bombarding me with messages about the importance of forgiveness and family. Others stood by me, recognizing the toxicity of the situation and supporting my decision to protect myself. My parents were caught in the middle. They understood why I didn't want to go to the wedding, but they were also feeling pressure from Aunt Karen. It wasn't until my mom overheard Aunt Karen badmouthing me at a family gathering that she finally snapped. "That's enough, Karen," my mom said, her voice firm. "You and Brittany are the ones tearing this family apart, not my daughter. If you can't respect her decision, then maybe it's best if you don't come around for a while." The family was divided, and for a while, it felt like every day brought a new drama. But through it all, Jake was my rock. He stood by me, defending me to those who criticized my decision and offering comfort when the stress became too much. As the weeks passed, the uproar began to die down. Those who truly cared about me understood my position, and those who didn't, well, I realized I was better off without them in my life. Brittany's wedding came and went. From what I heard, it was a lavish affair, but it was also marred by drama. Shocking, I know. Apparently, Brittany had a meltdown because the flowers weren't the exact shade of pink she had ordered, and she ended up pushing one of her bridesmaids into the pool in a fit of rage. My cousin Emily, who attended the wedding, called me afterward. "You dodged a bullet," she said. "It was a nightmare from start to finish. Brittany was a complete bridezilla, and Aunt Karen kept going on about how the wedding would have been perfect if you were there. As if your presence would have magically made Brittany less of a self-centered brat. As for me, on the day of Brittany's wedding, Jake and I took a trip to the beach, the same beach where I used to be so self-conscious in my swimsuit. This time, I wore a bikini, and when Jake looked at me with love and admiration in his eyes, I felt beautiful and confident. We spent the day swimming, building sandcastles, and just enjoying each other's company. As the sun set, Jake surprised me with a picnic dinner on the beach. He packed all my favorites: fresh strawberries, cheese, and chocolate-covered almonds. As we sat there, watching the waves and sipping wine, Jake turned to me with a serious expression. "I know this year has been tough," he said, "but I want you to know how proud I am of you. You've stood up for yourself, set boundaries, and haven't let anyone dim your light. You're the strongest person I know, and I fall more in love with you every day." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but for the first time in a long time, they were happy tears. I realized that despite all the drama and pain, I had so much to be grateful for. I had a husband who loved and supported me unconditionally, friends who stood by me, and the strength to stand up for myself. "I love you too," I told Jake, leaning in for a kiss. "Thank you for being my rock through all of this." As we packed up our beach gear and headed home, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that choosing not to attend Brittany's wedding was the right decision for me, regardless of what anyone else thought. It's been a year since all this happened, and I can honestly say I have no regrets. Yes, I lost touch with some family members, but the ones who truly matter are still in my life. I've learned the importance of setting boundaries and prioritizing my own well-being. My relationship with my parents has actually improved. They've apologized for not always standing up for me against Brittany and Aunt Karen in the past, and we've had some really open, honest conversations about family dynamics and expectations. They've been making a real effort to support my decisions and respect my boundaries. As for my career, I've been thriving. Remember that promotion I mentioned earlier? Well, I've continued to excel at my job, and I'm now being considered for a management position. Jake jokes that my experience dealing with Brittany has given me excellent conflict resolution skills, a must-have for any manager. Jake and I have also been talking about starting a family. We're not quite ready yet, but we've started discussing our hopes and plans for the future. It's exciting and a little scary, but I know that whatever challenges come our way, we'll face them together. Brittany and my aunt still try to reach out occasionally, usually when they want something or when there's a family event they think I should attend. I maintain a polite but distant relationship with them, always careful to protect my peace of mind. About 6 months after her wedding, Brittany called me out of the blue. I was wary, but I decided to hear her out. I owe you an apology," she said, her voice uncharacteristically small. "A real one this time. What I did at your wedding was unforgivable, and I'm truly sorry." I was silent for a moment, trying to process her words. "What brought this on?" I finally asked. Brittany sighed. "My marriage. It's not going well. We're in counseling, and the therapist has been helping me see how my behavior affects others. I've been doing a lot of self-reflection, and I realized how horrible I've been to you over the years, especially at your wedding. Part of me wanted to say, too little, too late, but I held back. Instead, I said, I appreciate your apology, Brittany. It means a lot to hear you say that. But you have to understand, a lot of damage has been done. It's going to take time for me to trust you again." "I understand," she said. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I hope that maybe someday we can try to rebuild our relationship. I miss my cousin." After that call, I had a lot to think about. I discussed it with Jake and with Dr. Lisa in our next therapy session. They both encouraged me to take things slow, to protect myself while also being open to the possibility of reconciliation if Brittany truly seemed to be changing. Over the next few months, Brittany and I had a few more conversations. They were awkward at first but gradually became easier. She seemed to be making a genuine effort to be less self-centered, to actually listen when I spoke instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. Aunt Karen, on the other hand, has been slower to come around. She's still upset that I didn't attend Brittany's wedding, though she stopped actively trying to turn the family against me. My mom tells me that Aunt Karen misses me, but is too proud to admit it. Looking back, I realized that declining Brittany's wedding invitation and blocking my aunt were acts of self-love. I refused to let others dictate my worth or manipulate me with threats of exclusion. I chose my happiness and mental health over the facade of family harmony. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. I've grown stronger, more confident, and more sure of myself. I've learned that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family. I've discovered who my true friends are, and I've deepened my relationship with Jake in ways I never expected. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for declining my cousin's destination wedding and blocking my aunt? Should I have just sucked it up and gone to keep the peace? Or did I do the right thing by standing up for myself? Edit 1. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thank you all for your supportive comments and for sharing your own stories. I'm overwhelmed by the kindness of internet strangers. To address some common questions. 1. Yes, Brittany had been drinking at my wedding, but that's no excuse for her behavior. She's always been attention-seeking, but this was a new low. 2. No, I didn't get a chance to confront Brittany immediately after the wedding. She left right after being escorted out, and I was too emotional to deal with her then. 3. Jake wanted to confront Brittany and my aunt directly, but I asked him not to. I didn't want to escalate the situation further. 4. Some have asked about my relationship with my parents through all this. They've been incredibly supportive. They were furious with Brittany and disappointed in my aunt's reaction. They fully support my decision to distance myself. 5. To those suggesting therapy, thank you. I've actually been seeing a therapist to work through my feelings about all this. It's been really helpful. 6. For those asking about Brittany's husband, from what I've heard, he's a nice guy who seems to bring out a better side of Brittany. I hope for his sake that her recent self-reflection is genuine. Edit 2. Since many have asked for an update, here's what's happened since I made this post. The response here has been overwhelming, and reading your comments gave me the courage to have a frank discussion with my parents about the whole situation. They admitted they'd been feeling torn, trying to keep the peace in the family while also supporting me. After our talk, they decided to take a firmer stance. My dad called my aunt and told her in no uncertain terms that her behavior and Brittany's were unacceptable. He said that if she wanted to cut ties with me, she'd be cutting ties with them too. I was touched by their unwavering support. This led to a family meeting, minus Brittany and my aunt, where we all laid our cards on the table. It was emotional and at times heated, but ultimately productive. Most of my family members agreed that Brittany's behavior was out of line and that my aunt's threats were manipulative and harmful. We've decided to have a family gathering next month, a chance to reconnect and move forward. Brittany and my aunt aren't invited. It's a hard line to draw, but we all agreed it's necessary for now. As for Brittany, I heard through the grapevine that her marriage is still struggling. She and her husband are in couples therapy, and she's continuing with individual therapy as well. I hope for her sake that she's able to work through her issues and become a better person. I'm continuing therapy and working on setting healthy boundaries. Jake and I are planning a vow renewal ceremony for our 2nd anniversary, a chance to reclaim our wedding day and make new, happy memories. On a personal note, I have some exciting news. I'm pregnant. Jake and I found out a few weeks ago, and we're over the moon. It's early days yet, so we're keeping it quiet, but I wanted to share it with you all. Your support and advice have meant so much to me through this journey. We're already thinking about how we'll handle family dynamics with a baby in the picture. We're committed to creating a loving, drama-free environment for our child, which means continuing to enforce boundaries with certain family members. Thank you all again for your support and advice. It's been a difficult journey, but I feel stronger and more confident than ever. Remember, it's okay to prioritize your own well-being, even if it means going against family expectations. You're not responsible for managing other people's emotions or bad behavior. Stay strong, Reddit. Edit 3, baby update. We're having a girl. The 20-week scan went perfectly, and we're busy preparing the nursery. Jake is already talking about how he's going to be wrapped around her little finger. We've decided to name her Lily, after my grandmother. It feels right to honor the strong women in our family who taught me about love, respect, and standing up for myself. As for family matters, things have been interesting. Brittany reached out when she heard about the pregnancy. She congratulated us and asked if she could be involved in the baby's life. I told her we'd take it one step at a time, depending on her continued behavior. Aunt Karen, on the other hand, seems to think a baby means all is forgiven. She's been calling my mom, talking about planning a baby shower and buying gifts. Mom shut that down quickly, reminding her that the ball is in her court to make amends before she can be part of this new chapter in our lives. Jake and I are focusing on the positive. We're excited about becoming parents and creating our own family traditions. We're surrounding ourselves with people who genuinely support and love us, and it feels amazing.